In episode 1 of our podcast, we reflected on the recent edition of the Payden and Regal Point of View. But while I had the chance to sit with Jeffrey, we moved on to talk about the next publication. So here in part 2 is your preview of the topics that we'll cover when the POV lands on your desk or in your inbox.
So the next edition, it's always in the works. And maybe the one after that, what are you working on for the next edition?
Okay, so right now, I think the Payden and Regal view is upbeat, at least on the U.S. economy. We expect continued growth. We would call it a soft landing, right? Everyone knows that, I think. So my sense is it would be more helpful for our strategists and for clients to think about, okay, where could things go off the rails, if you will? What could be the cause of the next recession? So we are writing a piece looking at some possible culprits, if you will.
Understanding the risks to your thesis.
Yeah, exactly. And historically, things that really get on our radar are areas where you've had a lot of debt or credit fueled growth or investment in a short period of time. Those are, for me, those are the prime candidates for a business cycle downturn, because that's what we've seen in history. To highlight a couple, we've seen an enormous amount of consumer spending in the U.S. in durable goods. So whether that be autos or, home renovation appliances and the like.
How much of that has been borrowed money?
An increasing amount has been borrowed money. Yes. I wish I could give you a statistic on the.
Maybe you will in the next edition. Yeah. But I guess
by and large,
the more that is borrowed, the more influence there is around interest rates and affordability and the residual value of some of those.
Can be paid back. Yeah. You're always concerned when stuff is done with borrowed money because it's done under based on some lofty forecasts about the future that may not pan out, and then you may not be able to repay. So that's usually the concern.
How about cars or autos in that context? So people buying maybe a more expensive car than they would have done because the finance was available, maybe on some kind of leasing deal. Yep. And then the car has to go back and maybe left with no equity in that and a lower residual value. Is that
exactly the concern? Yeah. And then does that cause a pullback in overall spending as well? So that would be the concern with consumer durables. We also saw a huge amount of money go into building out flats, you would call them, right? Multifamily housing apartments, we would say. We do have a housing shortage in the U.S., and there was an exuberant big build out. Now, as many of these apartments come online, the question is, are they all in the right location to match with buyers or renters? Rental vacancies are creeping up. Rents have slowed, rent growth. So to the extent that investors build out a building based on more lofty assumptions for rent projections, then there could be some disappointment there. So that's something to look forward to or to worry about.
Sure. Maybe not look forward to.
Private credit. I think the AI stuff that we've already discussed would be a prime culprit for
a whole one of these podcasts on private credit, but that's a different story. So, okay, so that's Article 1.
That's Article 1. Yep.
What else?
We're also, music.
Love it.
Yes, I know it's near and dear to your heart. But some people say to me, Mark, they say, "Oh, music's dead," And I notice it's as you get older, like myself, where music that was produced between the ages of my age of 16 and 25. In my mind, that's the best music ever made.
It is for anybody, regardless of age. It's always that time.
Yeah. So people say music is dying. We are going to argue in this piece that no. We are in the golden age of music. And what do we mean by that? Well, more people are able to produce music. We're producing this laptop-based podcast here, right?
Yeah.
You can churn out a nice track in the comfort of your home on your laptop by yourself.
And there are many successful musicians now who started out doing exactly that.
So it's being produced than ever before. But on the consumer side, you have at your fingertips way more music more cheaply. I remember in high school thumbing through, music store, looking at CDs, and there were quite a few CDs in the store at the time. But for me, as a high schooler, they were quite expensive.
They were. In my teens and early 20s, I ran a mobile disco for a while, and I spent a lot of time in the record shops just buying. You had to buy the latest chart music every week
Yeah.
to keep your disco current. And it was an expensive business.
Yeah. So
Buying those physical records,
now you have Spotify and the like, and you have millions of tracks at your fingertip.
or in my case, millions of vinyl records in my loft.
This is the golden age of music, Mark. That's my argument.
Okay.
And we're gonna back this up with data. Okay. And the reader is going to be so overwhelmed, they're going to come over to our site.
Excited to see that. Okay. And the final article.
Oh, we have an article on Europe. So I'm here in the UK, but thinking more about continental Europe, and you'll remember Mario Draghi,
Of course.
the
Doing whatever it takes.
whatever it takes as the president of the ECB, and then a very short stint as a PM in Italy, but more recently wrote or was involved in producing, I think it's an 89-page piece on what is holding Europe back, especially relative to the US. So it's things like productivity and innovation.
Regulation
is in there. So the piece is going to, I think, for us, distill down what we think is most important, which is honing in on financing of new enterprises. That's a big part of it.
Okay.
It's much easier to get venture financing, angel financing to start a new firm in the US. It's much more difficult in Europe. And, as we already discussed, that's a key part of the future of growth. So taking 89 pages about what ails Europe and narrowing it down to something digestible, interesting, fun even, and with a number of charts for readers. So that
and believe it or not, we did actually talk about this before sitting here in our conference room in front of the Bank of England. We did talk about this before rather than just throw our camera in front of us and start talking. I know there's a piece coming on driverless cars.
Yes. Yep. So we're working on that as well. That was inspired, if you will, by a daily jaunt that we go on. So several of my colleagues in Los Angeles, we will go when we can sneak out, go to a coffee shop relatively nearby. It's almost a mile from the office. And there also, we noticed, is a Waymo autonomous vehicle, sort of a training operation. It's geo-fenced in downtown and various neighboring areas. And we thought, you know what? We should take that on the way back to the office
So how many of you were there?
There were 3 of us on that vehicle. Well, one member of the group was somewhat reluctant passenger on this journey, but we got him in nonetheless. And, so the article will tell the tale of the return to the office. Did we make it? What was the journey like?
Well, clearly you survived.
Clearly I'm here, stealing the punchline. But I think what the article will dip into is, okay, there are a couple of different companies pursuing autonomous vehicles, different methods, different approaches, if you will. And, one thing that struck me about the Waymo car in downtown, I don't know if you've seen one circulating yet.
I have not.
It looks like a science, a kid's science project. It is loaded up with so many, bits and bobs and sensors and gadgets. So we'll talk about the approach.
So I have seen them in California. I have to say that the concept of having one right here past Bank Junction terrifies the life out of me. But looking forward to.
Is it more terrifying, Mark, than the folks on bicycles that just zip by? Like I cross the street to come over here, across the road, and I don't see taxis, I don't see the autos, but then sometimes you miss those.
Yeah, that's not bicycles. That's the people who ride them. But
yeah,
that's a whole different thing. Okay. So it's super.
You have a lot to look forward to.
It's been brilliant having you here, Jeffrey. And
my pleasure.
I know we've got client events and things while you're here too. And hopefully you've enjoyed this interaction and discussion and insight into not only the current edition of The Point of View, but the process around pulling articles together and what's coming. And see you next time.